IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Ganatantra podcast. I am Sanjay Kumar.
And I am Saryu Natarajan.
In this, the last episode of our election special, we are taking a slightly different turn. Instead of discussing any specific state, because in the seventh phase, no one particular state goes to the polls, we thought we'd do something different. We realized that once the last vote is cast, you will probably be bombarded by a surfeit of exit polls and various post-poll surveys. And it's a common complaint, I think, of anybody who follows elections in India that either we are all obsessed with the opinion exit polls, or we're complaining about how bad and how useless they are. And there's probably a good reason for why there's a market for being interested in them, but also not being able to get a good sense of what is going to happen even by following them. So in this episode, what we thought we'd do is that we talk about exit polls and opinion polls in some detail. And in doing that, this is going to be a bit of a two-part episode. The first part, Saryu and me, will talk a bit about what's an exit poll and opinion poll, what seem to be the large problems. And in the second part, we have Sanjay Kumar of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, who will try and answer some of the questions that we have sort of posed in this first half.
Yes, I mean, there's going to be not just polls, there'll be poll of polls and maha poll of poll and supercharged poll of polls. It is going to be a surfeit of information, and it's one of those things where you can't really look away. I mean, You know that there are questions that you need to ask about how these polls are being conducted and what are the big issues there. But it's impossible to look away. I mean, I think there are a couple of points, but one definitely worth thinking about is the way in which polling is actually done, sort of the actual process of polling. What are the ways in which voters are sampled? What are the ways in which, the actual interview is conducted? Is it telephonic? Is it something else? So there's a whole range of questions around it, around how the poll or the mechanical aspects of how the poll is conducted that you need to inquire into.
And we're talking also about a country the size of India, which has, as per the Election Commission, 90 crore voters, over 3 million square kilometers to cover. So questions of sampling and actually going out and figuring out how many people there are probably involves a certain level of cost that a lot of survey agencies are not willing to bear.
Indeed. And there's also huge trade-offs that you end up having to make, or there are little trade-offs that you end up having to make, which all ultimately build into the kind of poll that you get or the quality of its or in some ways, I guess, the predictive capacity of the poll. Did you indeed go out and interview the sample that you sought to interview? And there are things that the pollster or the polling agency can control. So it's a methodological question. But I suppose some questions also relate to the way in which the reality is. The fact that there's diversity, and so there might be challenges around who can interview whom and the ways in which the poll is actually conducted. But indeed, so this gargantuan process is something that definitely needs unpacking.
And what to me seems, at least the reason I suppose a lot of people in India start talking about polls is we have seen successful examples in other countries in the world. You have Nate Fox and Nate Silver. Nate Silver, who has who at least claimed till recently to have got it down to science, and managed to successfully predict at least 2 polls and get it quite wrong with the third one, but not so wrong in the sense. And if you're somebody who understands statistics, you'll realize why he didn't get it so wrong, and that the possibility of a Donald Trump win was within the realm of possibility. But we don't see that kind of nuance coming into the numbers that we see in India. And what ticks me off is actually 2 things, and hopefully we'll talk about this in some more detail with Sanjay. One is that in India we never know who is being polled. Right? There's a transparency issue involved.
Oh, sure. Yes. Very significant.
We don't know if this person is a likely voter. We don't know if this person will actually turn up and vote. We don't know that, yes, they have nice views, but they may not care enough to turn up and vote. We don't know any of that when somebody says vote share is likely to be this. A second thing which sort of ticks me off is, given how incredibly complex India is, if you want to add another level of complexity, let's think about the first past the post system. If you were to poll for a single seat, I'm sure vote share will easily convert into who will actually win or who will actually lose. When you take it to the level of the state, then unless you poll every single constituency, the exact same number of people, if you try to generalize it across the state, then it's likely to be slightly more wrong. Now extend it to the whole country and 29 states of differing sizes and differing constituency sizes, the error margins could be so huge. So I always ask myself, how are people converting? Okay, you may be right in saying 30% of the people will vote for party X and 40 for party Y. But how are you saying party X will get so many votes and party Y will get so many seats rather?
Indeed. And also I think the first past the post presents a very complex situation where there is no limit on the number of parties that can contest, right? Which means that when you're polling, which is usually before elections, and we're talking about predictive polling here, very often it's difficult to be able to capture the entire spectrum of political parties that will end up participating. The other challenge around the first past the post system, right, is that very often if you don't get a ticket for whatever reason, political, apolitical, meritocratic, anything, we've seen instances of people who contest as independents, right, who have an impact on the vote share because they're usually formally represented by a political party, but now they're doing this on their own. So that could be something that distorts vote shares at a ground level, and that in sequence could add up to a delta in the ultimate vote share, which happens often in the days before elections, before polling is conducted. So you can't account not just for the variation that the country presents, but also the dynamism of the entire electoral process itself. There could be an event that happens tomorrow that changes the way people think about it or what their perceptions are. So it's that bridging that gap is something that is difficult to do. I mean, it's the reality of polls. I'd like to bring up another issue around this, and around sort of the value and the importance of polls, right? Which is that temptation or the attraction of polls is that we're looking for the answer to who's going to win the elections. So we're we want them to be oracles that tell us about our immediate future, like who's going to win, who's going to form the government, and who's going to be our prime minister. This could inform both just your curiosity, but also other things like, the stock markets, betting, God knows what else. But one of the other important things, right, around this is also to know the changing basis of why people are doing what they're doing. So there are distorting events like we spoke of just now, which could happen, which intermediate between when the polls are conducted and when the elections happen. And so you really don't know what effect they can have. But underlying the whole idea of polling is also to know how people are thinking.
And I think that is perhaps the most important part of this, because you don't want political discussions to simply be limited to the so-called pundits. You don't want it to be limited to the politicians. At the end of the day, the third P in the process, the people, also matter. And given the size of this country, I suppose no one person is ever going to be in a position to say, I know what people are thinking. You need some sort of a good methodology. You need some sort of a well-structured approach to understanding how people think about these things. Because let's be honest, I mean, your lived reality will mean that you think about things in a very different way from somebody who might have a slightly different lived reality. So I guess an important function, you can of course say opinion and exit polls are pure entertainment, that they're just something nice to watch when the news cycle is sort of slowing down in time for election. But I do think that taken seriously, it tells us what has happened in the country in the past cycle, election cycle, so to speak, or for that matter, the state. As we've been tracking each particular individual state, we have seen the narratives are different for each state. There's no one overarching thing that we could find across all the episodes that we have recorded so far.
True, and also I think, we heard in a recent episode, I think the last episode with Roshan. So we often look for, around 2014, there was a discussion that a certain kind of right-wing politics has got firmly entrenched because of the BJP's success and the fact that it won a majority in parliament. But the data is showing that it's not as entrenched. And you can see that in the changes in the assembly elections as well. And Roshan talked much more eloquently about it than I am. But, that is something also that polls can shed a light on, the way in which we as a society are changing. So,
and I think that makes sense. And given all these questions that we have raised, how are polls structured, how they're carried out, and, what use they actually are, we thought it best, of course, that we should have some of these points answered by an expert, somebody who's actually carried out these polls. carries out probably one of the most credible polls in the country, universally acknowledged, which is the CSDS Lokniti survey. And therefore, we'll take a short break. And on the other side of this break, we will have Sanjay Kumar of CSDS speak to us about opinion polls and exit polls.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Screwala, first-generation entrepreneur and co-founder at Upgrad. My podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open, is a companion podcast to my best-selling book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. On this podcast, I talk to Amit Doshi, founder of IVM Podcast, about my entrepreneurial journey. I walk you through my successes and failures, mostly my failures, and the lessons that I learned from my experiences, family, and colleagues. What was my first entrepreneurial venture? Why I chose Japanese cartoons over animation cartoons on Hungama? Why did I sell my stake at UTV to Disney? Find out all this and more on the Ronnie Screwala podcast, Dreaming with Your Eyes Open. New episodes out every Tuesday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to the Ganatantra podcast. To continue our discussion on exit polls, opinion polls, and polling of various sorts, we have with us Sanjay Kumar of the Center for the Study of Developing Societies.
Sanjay Kumar is professor and currently the director of the Center for Study of Developing Societies. His core area of research is electoral politics, but using survey method as a research tool, he has been engaged in conducting research on a wide range of themes such as Indian youth, state of democracy in South Asia, state of Indian farmers, slums of Delhi, and electoral violence. He has published widely, written several books, edited volumes, contributed chapters for several edited volumes, published articles in various national and international research journals. His most recent book is Post-Mandal Politics in Bihar, Changing Electoral Patterns. He has several other publications written over a long and illustrious career. Besides his academic writing, he writes regularly for both national and regional newspapers, both in English and Hindi. His articles have been published regularly in a range of publications such as The Hindu, Indian Express, Asian Age, Deccan Chronicle, and Dainik Bhaskar. He is also a well-known face on Indian television as a psephologist and a political commentator. He has also been an international election observer in many countries. Thank you, Sanjay, for being with us today.
My pleasure.
So, if we could jump straight into the questions that we'd like to ask you. I mean, we'd love to start with understanding a little bit of how surveys and election surveys are actually conducted and some of the difficulties in extrapolating from the survey data into making seat predictions. Because that's, I think, the first question anybody asks of election surveys, which is how much is each party going to get and who's going to win? And also around that, some of the mysterious aura around models. We'd love to unpack that a little bit more.
No, the first question of how surveys are conducted, I think you can't conduct a survey if you don't speak to the voters. But there are different methods of speaking to the voters. Some people do it over telephone. Some people try to do it over internet. At CSDS, what we have been doing since many, many years, and we continue doing that even now, we actually talk to the voters face to face. We send out investigators. People travel to different places, different corners of the country with a structured questionnaire. So we're still in a traditional mode of conducting survey. We're still not using the iPad or the phone. We did try a couple of times. But the basic thing is you go out, reach out to the voters at their home, at their workplace, not meeting them as stranger on the bus stand or at pawn shop or at tea shop. But we try and make an effort to first randomly select the people whom we want to interview. And I would like to emphasize this point. They are selected randomly. And when we do a random selection, it means traveling to interior places if voters are living in interior places. So we travel to Bastar. We also do go to Mumbai. We also go to Chennai. So reaching out to voters at their workplace, at their home, doing a detailed interview with them with a structured questionnaire. We collect their opinion, attitudes, perception. And then all this data is entered into a computer. And what we get is their opinions, attitudes, and definitely the voting question, which party they are likely to vote for. This is precisely how the survey is conducted.
Yes. And just to follow up on that question, in terms of converting this vote shares into seats, right? How do we, what, I mean, is it just, should we just leave it at say this is probably the vote share and, let's not go into the question of seats, or is there a way in which we can do this which gets it right more often than not?
See, the difficult answer is how do we get it right? Is there a method which makes sure, which ensures that one would get the seat projection right. I think there is no way, no method which can ensure that we are getting the seat forecast right.
Yes.
But I think if we are doing the survey in a right method, if we go out and reach to the representative sample of voters, then what the basic expectation from any survey would be to get opinion attitude in a correct range.
Yes.
And when I say opinion attitude, it is an opinion about which party they are likely to vote for.
Right.
So I think it is reasonable to expect from a survey that the survey should give a estimate of which parties likely to get how many votes.
Right.
And if the survey gets it wrong, in a sense, the variation between the final vote share, the final outcome of election, and what survey has predicted, if there is a huge variation, I think there is a big problem with the survey.
Right.
But I think if the survey gets an estimate which is in the range of 1.5-2%, I would consider it as a good quality of a survey.
Okay.
To give you an example, if a survey predicts party A is likely to get 30% vote, and finally if the party A ends up getting 31.8 or 28.2, I would consider it as a good quality of survey, because in a large country like India, where there is a lot of diversity, and the diversity is not only about region, there is diversity about caste, religion, and all this diversity. There's diversity about educational attainment. There are voters who are well educated, we have voters who are uneducated. So all various kinds of diversities are there, and all these diversities has an impact on voting preferences. So in a diverse country like India, if a survey gets vote estimates, which is more or less in the range of 1 or 2% error, I would consider it as a very good survey.
Right.
The challenge is about converting this vote share into seats.
Yes.
And this challenge would remain a challenge. It had been a challenge. It is a challenge in 2019, and it would remain a challenge even in future. The basic reason is with the same vote share, parties can get different seats, and it has happened in the past.
Yes, that's true.
If we look at 2014 Lok Sabha elections, Congress had 19.6% vote, and Congress ended up getting 44 seats.
Yes.
If I want to remind our listeners that in 2009 elections, BJP had 18.5% vote, 1% less vote compared to Congress.
Yes.
And BJP had 116 seats in the Lok Sabha.
True.
Exactly.
And there are numerous examples of this kind, that same vote share may not end up giving similar kind of seats to different parties. So that's a big challenge. And I can explain when you ask a follow-up question that why do we find this strange relationship of vote and seats? But this is a strange relationship between vote and seat. So even if a survey is very close to assessing the vote share, you can go horribly wrong when it comes to making seat predictions.
Right.
Yes. And what are some of the reasons that intermediate between having vote share and then being or having difficulties in being able to predict seats, right? Is it to do with the nature of ground level politics, or is it something within the model itself?
I mean, sorry, just to add to that, is it a feature of first past the post itself? I mean, do we find this problem in countries which follow the parliamentary system as well?
Yes, you have rightly mentioned. It is the problem of first past the post system, because you can win a constituency with one vote, and you can win a constituency with 5 lakh votes.
Yeah.
So if you win a constituency with very small margin, a party with lesser number of votes may be able to win larger number of seats. And if a party is winning seats with very large vote share in every constituency, which we call a surplus vote.
Yes.
So you win a constituency, but you have a lot of surplus vote, and those votes are getting wasted when it comes to converting those votes into seats.
Right.
But if a party, and this is a clear example, 19.6% votes, and you end up getting 44 seats.
Yes.
And it has never happened in the electoral history of the country.
Yes.
There have been only 5 occasions when a single party has got a majority in the Lok Sabha.
Yes.
But on all the 4 occasions, the party got roughly in the range of 38-40% vote, and then party ended up getting a majority.
Yeah.
With 31% vote, BJP getting a majority is it looks strange, but it's not strange because it has a relationship with concentration and spread of vote. So what happened in 2014 was BJP's 31% vote was concentrated in the few states.
Yes.
They are in the Hindi heartland, and along with Hindi heartland, it was Gujarat and Maharashtra. So what happened? All their votes, which they got, almost got converted into seats. And they had no votes in Tamil Nadu, which would have gone wasted, because in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra, Telangana, you could get 3, 4, 5% vote. So your vote share will go up,
Yes.
which is likely to happen in 2019.
Yes.
But your seat, it will not get converted into seats.
Yes.
So it is a relationship of first past the post system. That's the only reason.
Yes, and the other feature, I suppose, of the first past the post system is that there is no limitation on the number of candidates that contest in a constituency. And over the past few elections since 2004, at least, the number of candidates contesting per constituency has risen very significantly, from an average of, I think, 10 to around 12, 14. And
Yes,
that might be another reason why the vote share of the overall winner is less.
I would mention two facts. In 2009, the total number of candidate parties which contested election was 363.
Yes.
And if I look at 2014, the total number of political parties which contested election was 464. So yes, the number of candidates who contested the 2014 election was much bigger compared to 2009. That's one factor, but that doesn't mean that candidates would essentially be winning elections with a smaller margin. In 2014 election, an average winner, whosoever won whether it was a BJP candidate, Congress candidate, or a candidate of any regional party. So the average winning margin was 15%, 1-5.
Wow.
Yes.
Between first and the
Second.
The gap was 15%. And in the previous 4 or 5 Lok Sabha election, it was roughly 9 and 10%. So in spite of larger number of candidates, the winning margin in 2014 increased. The average winning margin increased. People keep talking about UP. How did BJP manage to get so many seats in UP with 41, 42% vote? And we tend to believe that maybe BJP won by small margin. That didn't happen. BJP's victory margin in UP is far bigger compared to BJP's victory margin in other states. So even though larger number of candidates means votes getting far more spread, and that's theoretically it should be a challenge. But look at the anomaly. Theoretically it should be a challenge, but that didn't happen in 2014.
Correct.
In spite of larger number of candidates, the votes got concentrated between 1 and 2. Candidate 1 and candidate 2.
Yes, so the long tail didn't actually get any significant
Yes.
vote.
Yes. And we look at it in terms of what we call effective number of parties.
Right.
So
ENPs, yeah.
there could be larger number of parties, but this is calculated on the basis of each party getting how many votes. And the effective number of party, which is to say how many parties were effectively contesting election, was much smaller in 2014 compared to what we saw in 2009.
Right.
Yes.
And it was much bigger in 2004 and 2009 because many political parties managed to win seats and enter into the parliament.
Yes.
So the vote was more dispersed in 2004 and 9. So effective number of party was much bigger.
Yes.
And in 2014, because BJP and Congress managed to corner 50% vote, the effective number of party was less.
Was actually less.
Yeah.
That's an interesting paradox in some ways, which is not apparent unless you dig into the numbers and the data and the way seats are broken down.
Yes.
But one of the other questions we had was also the ways in which survey questions and questionnaires are framed. And since you've conducted surveys for such a long time, one of the questions we had was when you design the survey, how do you take into account current research around particularly the ways in which people are voting or thinking, or around groups or that kind of behavior into the survey making process, and to what extent is it even necessary?
So I just want to add one point to that. Does the fact that maybe the surveyor and the person the question being asked to do not necessarily belong from the same class or caste, is it something that you take into account? Because people might not necessarily give the truthful answer when they feel that they're not sure about the person.
See, if you are doing a survey of 10 people or 20, a small number, this may be possible that you try and balance or look at a relationship between who is interviewing whom. But in a very large scale survey, like a survey which we are doing right now with a sample of 20,000, we intend to interview 20,000.
Yeah.
The biggest survey which we conducted was in 2009 when we interviewed 37,000 people across the country. So when we are doing that, in such an exercise, we have 3,000 people going to the field to do the interviews. It is not possible, humanly not possible, to look at who should be interviewing whom. But we do take some care. If there is a Muslim-dominated constituency or a locality where we have to go and do the interviews, and we know that in that locality we need to interview Muslim women, then we would try not to send only male investigator to that constituency.
Yes.
It is important to send some female so that it may be easier for the female to interview a Muslim women. But this whole traditional notions of, and these are all questions in the mind of the viewer, reader, and listeners, that how is it possible to interview a woman by a man? We have experienced this over a period of time. We don't actually face this kind of a problem.
Right.
It is a problem limited to an upper caste families.
Right.
And in those families, if there are young women in our sample, as I mentioned earlier also, we do a random sample.
Yeah.
So it means we might get in our sample, maybe a 22-year-old woman who is a daughter-in-law of somebody's house. And our method suggests our investigator will go to that house and he or she will only speak to the daughter-in-law, no one else.
Right.
We don't allow any substitution.
Yes.
So sometimes it becomes difficult in the case when you get a female young woman to be interviewed by a male, and this female belongs to a upper class family. But largely on the other side, if you have women to be interviewed who belong to lower class, middle class, rural, there is no problem. These women are working in the field, they are sitting in their house, and you can easily interview these. So we don't balance that.
Okay.
The other question is, as I mentioned earlier, that we go and do the interview with a questionnaire, detailed questionnaire.
Yeah.
I don't know about other agencies how do they prepare the questionnaire, but what we try to do, we are an academic research institution. We are not only concerned about who is winning and who is losing, what is the vote estimates. That's an important aspect of this election survey.
True.
But what we try to do is to keep in mind that we need to explain the electoral verdict.
Of course.
Why people voted the way they have voted.
Yes.
It's not only who voted for whom.
Exactly.
Who voted for whom is important.
Yeah.
So when we design the questionnaire, we keep those things in mind and we do some kind of an academic exercise. We have a discussion about what could be probable questions which we need to explain the electoral verdict. Is it leadership? Is it religious polarization? Is it about development? Is it about jobs, etc.? So we would think of various themes and we will try and ask questions on each of these themes, which we think would be a variable to explain the electoral verdict. All this question about, is this election being conducted only in the name of Modi? How do we explain this if we don't have questions on leadership?
Absolutely.
Yes.
The whole question about nationalism, is nationalism a big issue? Is Balakot a big issue?
Yes.
Or people would be voting on issues of development, unemployment, rural distress. If we don't think about all these issues well in advance, if we don't ask questions of these kind, and after the election results, if we think of, or if we even make an attempt to analyze the result and think of whether unemployment was an issue or not, we won't be able to do that.
True.
So in short, when we are designing the questionnaire, we keep in mind the final output and we anticipate that these are the questions which we may need to answer to the reader, to the viewer and to the listener. So we design the questionnaire keeping all these things in mind, and we will have questions on all these topics in different sections which we think may be, or which we think are important issues in these elections.
True, and that way, in that way, the work of CSTS has been quite significant in providing both the data as well as the broader frame within which to understand and explain and unpack electoral results. There are so many PhDs written on the work of that you have done. So,
and that is quite just a couple of last questions. One of the things that I notice, which at least I don't know if this is, maybe I'm missing it or not. I have noticed that a lot of polls in other countries use the term likely voters. Or a poll of likely voters. And that makes me question one thing that we don't really find discussed during opinion polls and so on, especially opinion polls. What is the likely percentage of turnout? Because intuitively, I would say that maybe it's not going to be uniform across communities or across genders. And that may have a bearing on what people are saying as their preference. So is there a way that, one question is there a way a survey captures how likely a person is to vote? And, is it possible that, say, we can kind of predict the turnout on the day?
Especially also because political parties like the BJP, especially with their whole Panna Pramukh strategy, do focus on ensuring turnout.
Turnout, yes.
And there is, I don't know, rightly or wrongly, a belief that higher turnout does help the BJP in elections, though
that's debatable, but I mean, it's something
but
worth
there
maybe
is
debunking or exploring. Either way. Yeah.
But that is a sort of truism that has been spoken about. It's now got the status of an urban legend. So in terms of the turnout question, really is therefore important to understand who's going to show up and why do parties focus so much of their strategy on getting turnout.
Yeah.
See, in India at the moment, it has become so socially desirable that in a pre-poll survey and even in the post-poll survey, in a pre-poll survey, when we ask this question, how likely are you how likely you are to vote in this election? A huge majority of people are going to say, yes, I am likely to vote. I will definitely vote in this election.
Okay.
If we only look at the data, then we will, and if we only analyze the data, then we would end up getting that, making a estimate that maybe this election 90% people are likely to vote, because all of them would be saying we are likely to vote, we are likely to vote. And if we do it in the post poll after the elections are over and you ask, did you vote? 90% would say yes, we have voted, while we know that the turnout is only 65.
Yeah.
Last election it was 66%. Before that it has always been 58-60%.
Right.
But we know that there is a huge impact of turnout among different communities, and there is a lot of debate going on about the 91 constituencies which went to poll. The turnout has gone up, gone down, who have voted, who have not voted, who turned out to vote. So what we did in our pre-poll survey, this is a new innovation which we have tried to make. We would ask a question first, are you likely to vote? And we know we are going to get 90%, yes, we are certain to vote. And then there is a follow-up question, how certain you are that you are likely, you will definitely vote, you may vote, or you may not vote. So there is a follow-up question, and we in this pre-poll survey we got an answer that roughly about 65% people said they are definitely going to vote in this election. And then there are others who said there is a possibility, there is a strong possibility that we will vote, and these are about roughly 20%, another 20% saying there is a possibility I might not vote. But when we try and look at the caste community composition of who are most likely to vote and who are least likely to vote, we don't get a huge difference in terms of caste community pattern. But there is a difference. If we look at in terms of votes, the BJP voters in the pre-poll survey who indicated that they are likely to vote for, they will be voting for BJP or they are likely to vote for BJP, they are more firmed up. Among them, a lot of said they would definitely vote, but the voters of Congress and regional party, among them, they were a little unsure whether they are going to vote or not vote. So that's a pattern we noticed in the pre-poll. And this is also one indicator why sometimes what we estimate in a pre-poll and finally the results are very, very different, because the turnout is a big factor. We don't know. We would assume all our research would work with the assumption that the turnout is not going to be very, very uneven among communities. But finally we know that turnout sometimes are very uneven. We have witnessed sometimes Dalit Muslims not turning out to vote in large number. And in some elections, we also noticed this for the upper caste. So we have tried to build in a couple of questions to come closer to this whole issue of who is likely to vote and who is least likely to vote. But I don't think I would be confident to say we have got a good hand on that. But we are trying our best to get some sense of, or a better sense of, who is more likely to vote and who is least likely to vote in terms of caste community.
That's fascinating. I also wonder if, since as I understand it, the CSDS poll relies on electoral lists to start randomization. If the process of the way in which lists are made in itself, in some ways either refracts or distorts what happens in terms of who you interview. I mean, particularly in the context of Telangana recently, there has been allegations, and there's even a court case pending in the High Court around deduplication of voter rolls and whether there were some systematic efforts around it. Of course, this needs to be unpacked further. A software was used allegedly, and then some of the issues stem around or are centered around this. There's also, of course, the actual process, like local brokers or leaders play a role in deciding who gets on. Forms don't get submitted, and so some people get excluded versus included. So, how does that also fit in with the way in which the survey is done, and therefore how the model is built?
No, frankly, we have no way to, check our sampling model with all these allegations, and we do believe that at some places this may be happening. But finally, why we are confident about our sampling method? Because this may be a case in one polling station, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 100 polling stations. But when we randomly select, maybe say, 100, 200, 300, 400 polling stations, we work on the assumption that we are not likely to get all those polling stations where, this kind of an allegation would have been leveled.
Yes.
And if it is we get one polling station of this kind where Muslims have been sidelined, maybe we'll get another polling station where other community may have been sidelined.
Yes.
So we work on the assumption of one error cancelling the other. So we go with the electoral roll. We think there's no better way of doing the sampling.
Yeah.
But we guard ourselves with regard to the turnout in our survey.
Yes.
Yeah.
If in a location we intend to do 18 to 20 interview, and if we select only 20 people from the electoral roll, then we would end up getting only a smaller number of samples.
Yes.
Because we know that all these 20 people may not be waiting in the village for one of our investigators to go and interview them.
Yes.
Right.
We have two options. First, should we allow substitution? So you go to somebody's house, and same example I can take, young female who is a daughter-in-law of somebody's. The father does not allow this girl to be interviewed. Should we substitute? No, we don't allow substitution. So anticipating that we don't allow substitution and we need 18 to 20 interview in one location. So we oversample. So we oversample in a location. If the estimate is that we get 18, 20 interviews, so we'll select 30 people.
Yes.
And out of these 30, sometimes our field investigator end up with 12 interviews. In some places, they might end up with 22 interviews.
Okay.
But the instruction to them is that they have to approach all the 30. They cannot stop after they have completed 18 interviews.
Once they've
because there is a question of systematic leaving out one proportion of the village. Because if you start interviewing from number 1, and if by chance you get all the 18 interviews from 1 to 18, then what does the investigator do? Does he leave out the rest 12? No, he doesn't do that.
Yes.
And just to sort of round out, since we're almost time, just to say, clarify to our viewers, this is being recorded much before the elections are complete. So viewers, listeners will probably start hearing exit poll figures.
No. They won't. They won't get any figures of exit poll because the rules suggest you can do exit poll, but you can now the no exit poll can be aired before the last vote is counted. Before the last vote is cast.
Right. So, but I just wanted sort of your view on. You're going to see people are going to see a lot of numbers thrown about here and there. How do we tell which poll is likely to be more accurate? Is there some things to keep in mind when we're seeing figures being put up for us on television or on newspapers or websites? How do we tell which poll has probably gotten it right, or which one has done a better job of accurately surveying the... of course, probably CSDS will probably get it closest and best, but in terms of the various numbers that are going to be given to us, how do we tell which one makes the most sense?
No, I don't guarantee that CSDS number would be closest. But what I can guarantee is that CSDS survey would be most transparent.
Right.
So we would put up everything, even if we go wrong. We went wrong in Chhattisgarh. We got the wrong party winning. We predicted the wrong party winning election.
Okay.
But even this was put up on our website in a transparent manner to figure out where did we go, where did we went wrong, etc. So CSDS survey would be most transparent. That I can guarantee to all the reader, viewer, listener.
Sure.
But I cannot guarantee that the CSDS survey is going to be the most accurate.
Right.
And I keep giving the example like CSDS is a old player in this game, and I compare it with a cricket match. We used to have only 5-day match, then we moved to 1-day match, and then we moved to T20.
Yeah.
What happens is that when a player plays a T20 match, the technique is not important. You go and hit out, you try and swing your bat, and sometimes even with wrong shot, you get 6 sixes.
Yes.
But the same player, if he is asked to play a 5-day match, he won't be able to survive for 5 days. And sometimes we have seen the whole team getting bowled out in 2.5 days. The whole match ends in 2.5 days.
That's true.
So what is an indicator of judging a better poll? If we are looking at vote estimates, I think we would be very close.
Okay.
If we are looking at, if the judgment is only about seats, because you could predict a seat even without doing a survey. You could also predict vote share without doing the survey.
Yeah.
So if seat is the only predictor, I won't be able to say how do you figure out which survey may be more reliable. But I think there is one thumb rule, which is about transparency. People should be transparent about the sample size, about the locations where survey was conducted. And if at all, if I need to believe which survey would be closer, if I am looking at 10 surveys, I would try and look at the sample profile. Has the survey been conducted with the right kind of voters, right kind of people, right kind of respondent? And when I say right kind of respondent, it should be representative of the universe. So a sample of India, a survey, an exit poll of India should have almost 70% interviews from rural India, not from urban India. But most of the surveys, exit poll would end up having a very high proportion of urban voters. So in India, we know that there are roughly 13-14% Muslim voters. So the survey should also have 13% Muslim voters. So the profile of the people who have been interviewed for the survey or exit poll should more or less match the profile of the voters. If the survey gives these details, and if I find that the profile of the people who have been interviewed more or less matches the profile of the voter, I would have reasons to believe that this is a good survey. Sadly, most of the surveys won't tell us anything about sample profile. That's the real problem with election surveys in India at the moment.
That's true.
But you can hit 6 sixes and you can be a champion that way.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, what you have said gives us a lot to think about and how to understand the numbers that are being put up before us, what to take with a grain of salt and perhaps what to take with more salt. And eventually, of course, nothing can contradict the Election Commission's ultimate results, but it'll give us some sense of, and I think the more important question is not predicting the seats or the vote shares, but why people voted the way they did. What was the things on their mind? What compelled them to come out and vote for this party or this candidate or this cause in this way?
And I can say with great certainty, if you need to answer these questions, if you want answers to these questions, then you should only look for CSDS survey, no other survey.
Absolutely. I think that's beyond question. And I think it's the most detailed survey which tells you what is on the minds of our voters and the electors in this country. Thank you once again, Sanjay. It was great speaking to you. And you've given us a lot of insights. Thank you once again for being on the Ganatantra podcast.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Vaisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance, from stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Vaisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have. Paisa Vaisa is brought to you by Paytm Money.
Sachin Tendulkar, Virat Kohli, Don Bradman, and now Cyrus Brocha. Okay, probably not in the right company. I mean, Don Bradman is Australian. But it's called Cyrus Says, a wonderful show about everything. Find the show on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts.